and welcome back to another Caitian Star Pride production. Again, we have the usual suspects. We have Ermic, MCU, and Saran. But today we also went and dragged this guy handy.
Hi.
Such enthusiasm.
Oh, I'm just so happy to be here. Is that better?
Name.
A little bit better. Work on
Fleet.
the delivery.
Okay, so for those who don't know, I'm Kenneth Simmer. I'm one of the 5 admirals, fleet admirals of the Caitian Star Pride. I'm also the fleet counselor, which is fun.
He has to deal with me. Okay, that having been said, how and why did you join the Caitian Star Pride? Or rather, not how, but you know what I mean.
Well, I was invited by a member. Actually, he turned out to be the leader at the time.
That was Sakaran?
Yes, that was him. It was actually a few weeks after my previous fleet, so I wasn't really actively looking for other fleets to join, but it was kind of like, hey, do you want to join? And I was like, okay, sure. And yeah, it turned out to be a very good life choice.
Life choice, okay. Why Caitians?
I mean, in STO. Why Caitians? I don't know, really. My very first character was actually a Betazoid, because I don't know why, actually. But I don't know. I have a fascination with cats, so maybe that's why.
So, how'd you get involved? How'd you get interested in Trek itself, though?
That's actually kind of interesting. Because I actually got into it watching Reading Rainbow with
LeVar Burton.
Yes, LeVar. I was remembering just LeVar. They actually did an episode featuring Star Trek, and I remember that as a little kid. So I was growing up, I always kind of had this fascination with Star Trek, and I didn't actually start watching it until I was maybe 14 or 15 though. So yeah, I was kind of late to the party. Okay,
I'm going to ask a very stupid question here. What series were you watching at that point?
The Next Generation, actually.
Okay, was it still in production?
No, as I said, I was 12 or 14 or whatever, so I'm 22 right now, if that puts things into perspective.
And boys and girls, this is why they consider me the old Cait in the fleet. Well, in about another 3 weeks, I'll be 32, so I got a whole decade on him. Okay, tell us about Kenny, or, well, at least how you perceive Kenny, and we'll talk about all the snide stuff behind his back later on when he can't hear us.
Well, he's an engineer. Story-wise, he has 2 other siblings. He has a brother and a sister. He's kind of the underachiever of the family. He's still intelligent, but just not as achieving as they are, so he's kind of always living in their shadow kind of thing. He was born on Earth instead of Cait. Yeah, he had a very rough career. He's not exactly one of those officers that takes well to orders. He's more of does his own thing. So he's kind of rebellious, kind of like a renegade, but he still has certain rules that he sticks to.
And we put this guy in charge of the fleet. What does that say about us?
That you all do my bidding.
Dance, my little puppets, dance! Okay, I should point out at this point that Sakaran, who I believe is also the one that recruited me long ago, is no longer with the fleet. He has not been the leader for over a year now, if I recall.
Yeah, let's see. I was made a fleet captain July 16th, 2013. And I joined February 3rd, 2013. So I actually came into power pretty quickly.
To put things in perspective, everybody, Saran here joined about 2 years ago. I actually joined the fleet about 2 months before Saran did.
So, like I said before, Ermic really is the oldest Caitian in the fleet.
Okay, now we had a couple of other topics we wanted to try and cover on this episode. There are lots to talk about with the ships, lots to talk about with the game. There are 3 major classifications of ships in the game. You have science vessels, cruisers, and escorts. Now, I'm an engineer like Kenny, so we probably would be most interested in talking about the cruisers. MCU, if I recall correctly, is TAC.
I am a TAC, but honestly I prefer engineers.
And Saran over here is a Medikitty, and no, that does not mean he will fill your
Yes, you
prescription for
didn't
you.
say Saran this time.
So he might be best suited to talk about the science vessels. So why don't we start with MCU, who's been mostly silent till now. I'm putting you on the spot. Tell us a little bit about what makes an escort an escort.
Well, for the most part, they're the only ships that can load cannons, but they're also considerably weaker than some of the other ships. Well, they have a weaker hull, and so they're much more vulnerable to various sorts of attacks, and they don't seem to have the strength to keep their shields up for long. Mostly because everything is being thrown into the weapon systems.
In most cases, escorts do tend to have lower shield modifiers than cruisers and science vessels. He's right. They are about the only ships that can load cannons, specifically dual cannons and dual heavy cannons. Most ships can still load single cannons for some reason, and while turrets are considered cannons, they can be mounted on anything.
Actually, there are a few cruisers that can also equip cannons.
As well as science vessels, such as the temporal ones.
Those are exceptions rather than the rule, though. We're going to try and stick with just the basics on this one. Okay, one of the things he left out, though, is that escorts tend to also be fairly maneuverable, and they need to be. They need to have the ability to keep those cannons that have a very narrow firing arc pointed directly at the target so they can turn them into Swiss cheese.
Yeah, that's true. They are much faster and much more maneuverable.
And yeah, and they're very annoying in PvP situations as well.
Ironically, though, they're not the most durable ships in the game. They're really just more for damage more than anything.
That's not ironic. That's actually their entire point. It's similar to a destroyer in the current Navy. But
I don't know the term ironic. I don't know what that means. I use it all the time. Just give me a break.
Now, having corrected his ironic use of the word ironic ironically, try and follow that one. Why don't we have our friendly little Medikitty tell us about science vessels?
All right. Well, in my opinion, I think that science vessels are probably one of the more powerful ships in the game, mainly just because I noticed that they tend to take a lot of perspectives that are from both escorts and cruisers and combine them both into the single ship. Like, they don't do as much damage as like an escort would, and they can't tank as much as a cruiser would, but combining those two into a lesser form to an amalgamation of the two seems to work rather well in kind of a placating role, if more than anything, I'd say.
Okay, now what makes it a science vessel? I remember that there was talk that they would all end up with secondary deflector dishes. That hasn't happened yet.
Well, just to mention about the secondary deflectors, that was actually talked about at the Star Trek Las Vegas convention a few weeks ago, probably by the time this video goes live. They mentioned that got pushed back due to the Season 10 update. But anyway, as for what makes a science vessel, I think it's kind of like what I said, that it focuses on a placating role, which a lot of science abilities tend to be. They tend to be not so much damaging, not so much protecting, but more or less diverting the enemy.
Okay, so things like slowing them down, healing your allies, draining the opponent's shields. You're a support role. Okay.
Exactly.
Now, Kenny, do you want to take cruisers or should I?
We could probably do it together, actually.
Okay. Before we get to cruisers, though, one of the other things about science vessels is they tend to have the highest shield modifier rating. So the best shield in the game on a science vessel will usually give you the best possible shield rating in the game.
The different ships give different bonuses. Like, for example, cruisers tend to give power to all the subsystems. I think like the assault cruiser that one of my characters uses, it gives 5+ to all power. And I think mixed ship, I looked it up on the wiki, gives 10 to weapons and 10 to shields.
I think you're right. But I'm actually talking about the shield modifier.
And, well, that is what it is, I believe.
No, you're talking about the power. The shield modifier rating, you actually can look at it when you go and look at a ship when you're about to recruit the ship. It usually is going to be a decimal, like 0.5, or in some cases 0.9. That's a decimal percentage, in essence, that the shield will hit. So if it's a 0.5 shield modifier, whatever that shield rating is gets cut in half.
That would explain why you can see the difference in shield values on like shuttles.
Yep. Different shuttles, different ships have different shield modifiers. So that's an important thing. Okay, now that we've had that off the comment bit, Kenny, why don't you start us out with the cruisers? What makes a
Well,
cruiser a cruiser?
well, basically they're the tanks of the game. The main part of the cruiser is to absorb as much damage as possible. They're not as powerful as like tactical vessels, probably because the cannons. However, you have like the phaser arrays, and if you're the best way to fight an enemy with that is to put it on its side, so that the fore and aft phaser arrays actually hit the enemy as well.
That is technically called a broadside, by the way.
Yes, I never.
When you use beam arrays, they have a 270-degree firing arc. So, like Kenny said,
250.
I thought it was 270.
They changed it to 250, it looks like.
Oh. Well, anyway, like Kenny was saying, then I think like 70-degree angle or something between the two on either side that can fire all of them at once.
Correct. A broadside is going to get you if you're using beam arrays. For instance, my vessel is a Voth Bastion flight deck cruiser. It's a combination between a carrier, one special class, and a cruiser. I have 4 forward weapons and 4 aft weapons. If I put beam arrays in all 4 of the slots on fore and aft, if I go and give you a broadside, you're being hit by 8 beam arrays at once, and that can do more damage than the full forward firepower of an escort.
Not necessarily. Beam arrays fire much slower, whereas cannons fire much quicker. So what escorts, like you just mentioned, can do, they do more spike damage than anything, whereas cruisers do more sustained damage.
I said can, I didn't say would. One of the other big things to look at, each of these types of vessels has their own stressing point. An escort is going to stress tactical consoles. Tactical consoles are really good at boosting the damage you do. Science vessels stress science consoles. These consoles have a wide variety of ranges of what they can do. Some of them increase your shield abilities. Some of them make things like the Tachyon Rift more dangerous by holding people in it longer. There's just a lot you can do with science consoles. However, cruisers are for the engineers. We get multiple engineering consoles, which are usually going to be things like armor, turn radius boosting, or even just some really wacky things.
And the increasing the turn rate is kind of important with cruisers because they are the slowest turning ships in the game because they're big ships. So yeah, and I always have fun with my Odyssey. Well, all of my cruisers really, to like take a run at the enemy and then stop just within range. Unfortunately, sometimes I go like sailing into it even after I've disengaged full impulse, which, but they're great big ships. They're slow to turn and they're slow to stop. You have to be careful with those things.
To put it in another perspective, in an average, we'll call it an average battle line, your cruisers are going to be on the very forefront. Their job is to attract a lot of attention and to take a lot of damage. In the meantime, the science vessels are supporting them, healing them, slowing the enemies down, things like that. The escorts, meanwhile, are going to do hit and runs. Dive in, do a ton of damage, and then get the hell out long enough to survive, heal up, and then repeat the system. That's an ideal battle line, which, of course, in 3 dimensions works really kind of badly.
And ideally the best team.
Oh, that'll be good to know the next time we do an SDF together.
Now, it's not to say that good builds can't outperform other ones. My cruiser is built as a tank, but it can still deal a fair bit of damage because I've stressed the ability to do critical damage. I cannot necessarily kill other good tanks or certain science vessels. No build is perfect. No ship is perfect. Everybody has a strength, everybody has a weakness. Sometimes you just need to know how to exploit those. And sometimes you just need to know that you're not going to win and run like hell. 2 of the tank builds I've seen predominantly are mine, which is built around resisting damage to the hull. I have good, strong shields in the order of 14,000 per facing, and I have around 62,000 hit points per hull facing. I also have about 45% resist to every type of damage. So it takes a lot of pounding to put my ship down. The other side of that is the tank build that I saw Snowpaw recently create, where she was actually leeching my shields away every time she hit me with a weapon. So while I wasn't able to do a lot of damage to her, every time she hit me, she's draining my shield. So my shield's going down from weapons damage and shield drain. So I couldn't really scratch her, but she came very close to killing me several times. One reason she couldn't, I'm a good repair man.
This is usually why tacticals have escorts, science officers have science vessels, and we engineers have the cruisers, obviously, because our abilities all support that.
That's not to say that you can't go and mix and match.
Oh, no. But
I have a Defiant. It works fairly well. It's a decent heavy punch vehicle. It just doesn't work as well as a tactical officer probably could.
yeah, like I have a Prometheus class ship. You know, the multiple escort, whatever it's called.
Multi-vector assault vehicle, something like that.
Yes, this was before I got it before actually understanding how Star Trek Online actually worked a lot. So I didn't know that technically. Well, my abilities for repairing it are pretty good, so it's not really a problem with that. But it was a problem with like I didn't really know that my strength was healing my own ship. Like the hull, I mean, but yes, I used to be oblivious to everything at one time.
I remember that ship. It did pretty well.
It did, but unfortunately, not so much against the Borg.
Okay,
Well, you were using the Riemann shield, so...
Okay, we've got about 10 more minutes, guys, so let's move on to the next topic. And I just completely forgot what I was going to say. Somebody fill the blank, please?
Alright, question for everyone is, what's your overall impression of the game? Like, from story, graphics, stuff like that?
Let's let Kenny go first.
Honestly, I have like mixed feelings with the game. Like, obviously, because I'm kind of a Star Trek fan. Well, I'm not as crazy as a fan as some people are, but I'm pretty crazy about Star Trek. The ability to actually like captain your own ship really brought me into the game. And of course, like, I still get joy when I'm flying around firing phasers and whatnot. The thing is, but like over time it's kind of gotten old and they keep adding in new stuff. But like I started noticing that the graphics aren't really all that what they used to be. The story is kind of like early on
haphazard.
Yeah, like it's just a bunch of different events patched together, which I know, like happened throughout the series and Star Trek, but like overall they have like a certain theme to them. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a bit like playing 10 different series.
Yeah, because like first it's like, oh, we're fighting against the Klingons. Oh, we're fighting against the Romulans. Oh, we're fighting against the Borg, the Undine, the Breen, Cardassians. Yeah, I forgot the Cardassians. Sorry, and the Dominion.
Oh, and the really weird thing is with the Borg, I think that's where the Klingon War should have ended. At least in my opinion, because how long can you still keep fighting one another when you have this monolithic enemy like the Borg?
Oh yeah, and for some reason, it's never really explained. Like even when the Klingon War is going on, Omega Task Force is still arranged. Like
yeah, that is a weird setup. Basically, they still have the war going, but Jimpok says, Devok or whoever it is that formed it, yeah, go ahead and form your little group. It's like, I'm not going to end the war, but sure, we can cooperate with the enemy.
We're not going to give any secret details away.
Except you almost have to fight the Borg. That's yet another issue. But it's only with this last special episode that they finally put an end to it.
Yeah, they do have a problem with that. I think I've already given my views. To me, this is not Trek. This is World of Warcraft with a wash coat of Star Trek over it, and I can accept that most of the time. But it does get boring, and it does have consistency flaws. Unfortunately, as Kenny pointed out, I am one of those whack jobs who knows all these stupid details and can pull them out of my hat. I went and had a discussion today, even, about using phaser rays as point defense weapons, and I pulled out technical details without even looking at references. So, yeah, to the guys like me who are a little bit too much into Trek, this game can get disappointing.
Yeah, especially since they try to pull like the whole universe together, like the whole Star Trek universe, and put you in the game. Unfortunately, they didn't exactly do. I think they're doing the best job they can. Unfortunately, it's just one of those things that you can't do a good job of, unfortunately.
Well, I think it is still possible to do a pretty good job, but one of the things I think might help, especially for role-playing, is to offer like a Tier 6 version of the Lieutenant ships. That is also a little bit of false advertising on their part, that it's an MMO RPG. There's very little in the way of role-playing. Like, I've played all 3 classes, and the gameplay is not all that different. They've definitely improved the role-playing a little bit, giving you different options, but it still doesn't have quite the effect.
I think they're using like the incorrect definition of roleplay. What some people consider roleplay is you just play a role, and that's all they really consider it as. So I think they kind of think that, okay, you're playing a Starfleet captain or a Klingon captain or whatever. That's a role. So it's role play.
Unfortunately, it's not to those people like me who actually know what a role play is and who have considered it. But we're running short on time. Sran, this is your last chance. Get your 2 cents in before we got to cut this short.
Overall, I think it's a good game. I mean, I see all the points that you guys are talking about, but you gotta remember, this is a game. It's meant to have fun. It's not meant to necessarily... I'm losing my words here. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going with that sentence.
I'm not sure we do either.
I don't look so much at the story. I look more at the fact that it's kind of like an open sandbox game in a lot of ways, where you can make your own story, and I think that's what mainly drew me into the game. I mean, I put in 4,500 hours into this game. If it was not fun or anything, I wouldn't have done that in the first place.
To put things in perspective, he's put in 4,500. I've put in just shy of 2,900.
I know, he has a lot to catch up to.
Well, I see your point, but the way I see it, it's like with Mass Effect. There are people who play Mass Effect who are like you just are going there for the fun of it. It works pretty well, except for the ending of Mass Effect 3 for a lot of us. For people who do like going into the story, because it's there.
To me, a role-playing game is not, I put you in this environment and you do something. A role-playing game is about immersion. It's about getting into the character's head. You guys can tell when I'm role-playing because what happens to the way I speak in the game.
You speak all crazy?
Rimek speak good English, yes. But yeah, it's about getting into a character's head. It's about becoming that character. Not just watching the world around you, not just playing yourself with a whitewash of something else. Though that is a way to start role-playing. A way to start role-playing in a universe is to play yourself reacting to everything. Then let's move away from that. But hey, this is Meeting a Preacher, and we are almost out of time. So any closing comments, guys?
Not for me. I'm just glad to be here.
And it was good to have you on the show.
Yes, thank you,
you,
Kenny, for coming.
Okay.
No problem. Anytime.
Now, did you guys forget we did have something specifically arranged for Kenny tonight? We had that little bit of exercise we promised we would subject him to. So, Kenny, you see those crates over there?
Yeah?
Well, we're going to close this door, and we're going to open those crates. and then we'll have some fun.
Wait. No.
Alright everybody, we talked about this a couple of times. We are going to do a trivia game. Now, we didn't mention this in the video today, but there are two types of ships that are produced in the Caitian system, according to the culture document, that are both from the Star Trek original series era. Name either one of them in an email in-game to Remick, and you'll earn a prize based on how soon you answer and how well you answer. And remember, some of those prizes are pretty good, and some of them, well, I've got these dead tribble carcasses.
Isn't that a bit redundant?
Yes, I know, but I'm trying to do this on the fly.